Hello and welcome back to the part 3 of the process videos of my illustration. So over here I started to select the overall shape and then putting a gray layer as overall layer so that everything that's on top of it, I can use the clipping mask to make sure that the color doesn't go outside of the overall shape of the character. And also I am cleaning up the background so that whenever I'm filling those colors, it's easy for me to actually use the selection tool rather than going there manually to fill up all the colors. Again, I pulled out the symmetry tool because it's just so handy for this kind of decorative work. Over here, I started to fill the color of her skin because her skin color is already decided, so that I want to use it as a starting point and base all my other color choices on this. And sorry about the orange icon for the Zoom call because I was actually working on this, but I had to take a video call at the same time. So yeah, busy schedule. But anyway, so I continuously blocking out the color with a very solid brush tool. By the way, this is my favorite brush that I use. This brush is basically a flattened oval shape, and it doesn't have any transparency. It has rotation on it. So I have the Wacom art pen where I can rotate the tip of the shape. So it gives me solid colors but without any transparency, but I can change the shape whenever I want. And it also has a little bit of pressure sensitivity, so I can control the size. This comes really handy for me to do all this kind of color filling work and as well as my line work. I basically use this brush probably 80% of the time. It's just kind of like a pen, but when it's larger, it can also act like a marker. And whenever I need transparency, I just use the number keys to go around the opacity, so I can keep the opacity at the same level, but using the same brush all the time. And then sometimes I use the round brush, but also without any opacity change, because whenever I use opacity with pressure sensitivity, especially for this kind of, if it's painting, I would use that more, but for this kind of decorative work, and I wanted everything to be clean, doing things without the opacity actually worked out a lot better for me. For the metal beds, I initially wanted them to be silver because I tend to use a lot of gold, but maybe you can see in the end that I changed it into gold. It just kind of worked better for the color scheme, but I did play around with the color scheme quite a bit in this video process, and you will get to see it. I could have probably tried to use some other program like Clip Studio. However, for me, even though it works for certain situations, sometimes the smart feel kind of doesn't feel the areas that I want, and then I still need to go there and manually adjust it. And for me, for some reason, when I use Clip Studio, there's certain functions or certain brush pressure just doesn't feel super right to me. So I guess it's just it takes a while for me to get used to it still, but I've tried a lot of times, but eventually there's also something in Photoshop that I still have to come back for. That's why I couldn't make the full switch. But Clip Studio is a really good program that would be probably better to use for filling up the colors in this for what I was doing in this illustration. But that's also I've started the illustration in Photoshop, so just continue the whole process in Photoshop. Initially, I wanted to use this blue color because a lot of those patterns that I'm basing from is Islamic tiles from Islamic architectures. A lot of them are using a sort of royal blue kind of color, but I think the royal blue was too intense for me, so I wanted to use something more like um, more gray. I filled up most of the clothes using this blue. At this stage, I felt that was the colors that I wanted to go with, but also the tiles that they used have a lot of white colors and the patterns are quite intense. So I think the blue didn't work eventually, but I wanted to use the light blue for her fabric, for her headpiece. For the thinner fabric, it's kind of like a chiffon kind of materials that I want to portray. So it kind of adds a bit of lightness to the colors. If I wasn't recording this video and I don't want every frame to look so bad, I would probably use a much stronger color just so that I can see all these shapes really easily. Right now, this blue actually is very close to the gray, so I couldn't fill up all these colors very well, and eventually I had to clean up a lot. So if you are doing this without recording, I would recommend you actually picking a color that's maybe not the final color, but maybe something that's more saturated and it's easier to see when you fill up the shapes. Because this process is less about actually blocking out the color, but more about just clarifying all your layers and clarifying the zones that you want every color to be on, because digitally it's very easy to change all the colors, so it's better to just have all these clean zones of selections, so it's easy for you to come back later and make any adjustment. And for the belts, that's exactly what I was trying to do. I wanted to have this darker blue so that it's easy to tell that I've filled up all the areas that I wanted to fill up. Initially, they are supposed to be more like thicker fabric, because at first I thought leathers are probably too common. I wanted to use something a bit different, but the blue turned out to be very hard to work with, and I didn't want to have such an emphasis on these belts. So eventually I gave up with the blue and just go with the sort of leather. With the blue, I would really need to sort of explain this material in my illustration, but with leather, I think it's much easier to understand the material. And then I start to play around with the background, and because it does have the moon symbol, so I wanted the background to have a sense of night. So I chose this darker blue for the main background. But with the darker blue, the light blue sort of blended in a little bit more, And at this stage, I am starting to question my judgment. Um, and as you can see, when I mentioned earlier that I was trying to play around with the silver and I gave up and tried to go with the more of a darker gold kind of color. And I also start to play around a lot with her clothes. And at one point, I liked the orange because the orange stood out a lot more from the darker blue background. And I was basically just trying to adjust just trying to go through all the options I can and see what works best for me. But after playing quite a while with all the color options that I can have, I eventually realized that what bugged me so much was the white background. So over here, I actually tried to use some adjustment layers, hue and saturation, to play around with the colors and just trying to see if there's other color schemes that I couldn't think of by myself, but maybe by playing around I can see. And eventually I tried to mess around with the background colors and I realized that was what's been bugging me this whole time. And I couldn't decide between the orange and the blue. And I had to save it to the next day. And the next day I decided that I'm gonna go with white. And here's what I decided for the final colors, and thank you so much for watching.